did the Trump-Putin meeting really make any progress towards ending the war in Ukraine? The answer seems to be decisively no. And this is totally obvious to almost everybody except perhaps the president. Let's talk about why. Okay. So this is a meeting that for some reason the press has started characterizing as high stakes or very important. In fact, some in the administration even described it as important as the post-World War II Yalta Conference. This is, of course, preposterous because even the president himself at best described it as a listening session, which is not really something that the U.S. president has, given that, and also given that he flew from D.C. to Anchorage to have a listening session when he had a listening session over the phone with Putin. I have 4 of them, actually. And it seems like every time he has these meetings, nothing ever happens. Putin never agrees to anything. And that was obvious to any of us that follow this conflict, right? Because as you can see, leading up to this important meeting where Putin is sincere about peace by his own statements, by the president's own statements, Putin launched, again, looks like dozens and dozens of attacks in the last 24 hours into Ukraine. And the, of course, large-scale drone attacks. So this is not really the sign of a adversary of the United States who is interested in peace, right? And President Trump said we had an extremely productive meeting. Again, and many points were agreed to. There are just a few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant. We have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there. We have a very good chance of getting there. This is, of course, just the same thing he says after every single call with Vladimir Putin, after every single interaction. And it's part of Putin's strategy to continue to string the president along. And ultimately, you can judge someone by their actions. Again, this is a little bit turning into like a deadbeat dad who calls and is like, son, I'm going to make it to your birthday this year. I'm going to make it. I don't have work. I'm going to make it. And then he no-shows, right? And, you know, at some point, you have to realize, you know, around the time you're like 10 years old, or in the president's case, 87 years old, around that time, you realize you're like, man, a person can just lie to you, you know? And that seems to be Putin's MO. But Trump literally acknowledged that like 2 weeks ago and still was like, well, let me host the guy in the United States. Like somehow he lies over the phone, but he totally won't lie to our face. And what's also more troubling is not so much that this failed, right? Because one of the things, a conventional U.S. president, when they attend a meeting in person, it's seen as throwing their weight behind it, right? It's sort of staking U.S. credibility. Look at something like the Dayton Accords that ended the conflict in the Balkans in the 90s, right? This was something where the United States president was like, listen, I can throw around a lot of resources to you guys. I can really bring a lot to bear. And so that credibility, that willingness to say, you know, the United States is behind this, actually carries a ton of weight. But the truth is that like Donald Trump just doesn't behave that way. He shows up to things, he intervenes in things, and it doesn't reflect the full weight of the U.S. government committing. In fact, there's actually been very few policies that the full weight of the U.S. government has committed to. Essentially, it's been exclusively immigration. And even that has been, the administration has kind of done some rollbacks on. So I think this is overall I don't want to say it's not a nothing burger, because the problem is that the person who is emerging victorious, again, is Vladimir Putin, who has conceded nothing on the Ukraine war, offered zero concessions, and has changed nothing about his behavior. Again, it's just another time that dad picks up the phone and is like, I'm making it to your baseball game, son. And at some point your son goes, no, Dad, no, you're not. Like, just say it. Just be like, I'm not going to make it. I don't show up to these things. Right. And that's what Putin's doing, because again, it's transparently obvious that he is continuing his war because he doesn't have a choice. Right? Remember, he staked out to the Russian public that Ukraine had no business as an independent state. He explicitly was like, this is a conflict between us and NATO and Russia will win. He's fully militarized his economy. So like, if he was to stop the war today, the problem is that stopping the war today would be the equivalent of the United States taking like the entire healthcare industry or the entire tech industry and just gutting it out of their economy, right? It would cause a huge economic collapse to suddenly lose your primary economic driver. Well, that's what would happen if Putin terminates the war abruptly. And so he almost has no choice but to win, because even if the economy sort of shudders, he'll be able to stay in power because of a victory. But if he loses and his economy still suffers from this difficult demilitarization, he's literally not going to have a chance to stay in power. He's going to look too weak. So again, I think it's interesting that Putin said he and Trump had reached an understanding on Ukraine, but then Putin said, don't torpedo this nascent progress, which is nascent progress is that's a low bar, man. Because remember, we've had 6 phone calls, I think, between Putin and Trump since he's taken office. We've had 3 rounds of meetings, including in Istanbul, in Riyadh, now this one here in Alaska. And to date, Vladimir Putin has made 0 concessions. President Trump has introduced only a single meaningful consequence, reportedly sanctioning Indian oil as a secondary buyer, or sanctioning India with tariffs due to being a secondary buyer of Russian oil. That's the really only consequence he's introduced, in spite of, again, literally years, months and months of saying that this time, this is his final chance. This is, by the way, for those of you keeping track at home, this is the 3rd Trump ultimatum where he said if Vladimir Putin doesn't engage in a meaningful, substantive, good faith effort towards peace, there will be consequences, right? Remember, it was last week. The U.S. also had its ultimate final turbo peace deal. It also said, I think it was in Istanbul, that, hey, the Ukrainians are going to, the Ukrainians are going to, this is your last chance. You have to make a good faith effort to meet with them. And every time, right, when it comes to actually introducing any kind of consequence, Trump just backs off. So, again, there's a lot of this, this shit from AP that just treats it that doesn't understand Trump, right? They treat him like another leader. Normally, if a leader meets with an adversary, they don't have a handshake and a smile, because their critics will be like, hey, man, you're being really chummy with a bad dude. But for reasons like everyone in the U.S. just seems to understand that Donald Trump just doesn't play by the set of rules. Donald Trump is like that with everybody. And frankly, almost like the friendlier Trump is with you, the worse of a person you are. Because remember, in the 90s, his best friend was Jeffrey Epstein. So almost it's like the chummier Trump is with you, the more of a piece of shit you are. And the more he hates you, the more of a moral compass you seem to possess. Again, refute me if you want. Tell me the great, upstanding, value-based person who Donald Trump holds in incredibly high regard. Just drop it in the comments. Anyway, guys, if you want to actually do some good in the world and actually work towards ending this war in a meaningful way, and you want to send me on a one-way death march, you can go to the link in the description. This is our partnership with, of course, Ukraine Aid Operations. They are raising funds for one of the Ukrainian units, actually several Ukrainian units, who are dealing with the threat of Russian fiber optic drones. So if you want to help these guys get the defensive equipment they need, it's a US 501c3. It's tax deductible. Best of all, a anonymous Dutch donor has said they will match every donation up until we hit our $200,000 goal. And most importantly, if we hit it in the next 3 weeks, I will sign up and run for an ultra marathon. Paul, I thought you just had a kid. How are you training for an ultra marathon? You're sleeping like 4 hours a night. We're going to find out. It has generous cutoff times, and I'm going to try to take advantage of that. And plus, I'll film it and put it on YouTube because I'm a man of my word, right? There are still some of us left in the world. I know you guys are like that. So huge thank you to all the guys that have donated already. And, of course, be sure to also sign up on combatvetnews.com. Check it out, become a member, support the channel, and get access to that uncensored combat videos. Cheers. See ya.